the 1870s, letters crossed the Atlantic not for love, but for titles, dowries, estates. The scent of salt and polished trunks lingered as initials were stamped in gilt. By 1920, more than 350 American daughters had vanished into aristocracy. What else was quietly erased? Velvet stationery sealed with crests, guest lists, their lines struck in red, a trunk labeled CV that never returned. Between 1870 and 1920, fortunes rebuilt castles from Wiltshire to Blenheim. Consuelo Vanderbilt's wealth mended wings and roofs. Yet her letters whispered only of loneliness. When wealth bought a title, what else slipped into silence? Welcome to History's Ledger. This is where the story begins. In the chapters ahead, we will follow the daughters of America, more than 350 of them, who crossed the Atlantic between 1870 and 1897-1920. Their wealth restored Blenheim in Oxfordshire, Cliveden in Buckinghamshire, Highclere in Hampshire. Their names were written into contracts and guest lists, yet sometimes preserved only as initials in ledgers. We will see the Paris salons of Charles Worth. We will hear the organ thunder in St. Thomas. We will open the pages where names were blotted and trunks forgotten. Would you have traded your fortune for a leaking roof and a fading title? Would you trust a ledger where your name might be crossed through in red? Snow muffled Fifth Avenue in January 1874. Carriages cut shallow lines through the drifts. Inside gaslit mansions, coal smoke clung to velvet drapes and chandeliers. Daughters stood before mirrors taller than themselves, skirts swishing, eyes fixed on reflections that didn't feel their own. At mahogany desks, mothers unfolded cream stationery sealed in red wax. Open copies of Burke's Peerage lay beside them, titles marked in ink, dowries penciled in margins. That winter, the New York Herald declared, "English lords now seek their wives among our households, for our ladies possess dowries equal to the rebuilding of estates." Ledgers in these homes weren't diaries, they were account books. Daughters' names appeared beside sums, 100,000, 500,000, more. A red slash could erase a name as surely as silence. That spring, Jennie Jerome, just 19, boarded a steamer to Europe. Within weeks, she married Lord Randolph Churchill in Paris. Her trunks were filled with Worth gowns, lavender-scented gloves, pearl-stitched slippers. In November, she gave birth at Blenheim Palace, a son named Winston. Her fortune steadied Randolph's debts. Her name was consumed by title. 2 decades later, Alva Vanderbilt staged the grandest match of all. Her daughter, Consuelo, wept behind a locked door on her wedding day. Alva ordered the governess barred. Hours later, lilies perfumed St. Thomas Church as Consuelo walked in ivory satin and Vanderbilt diamonds. The guests saw radiance. She felt exile. Her dowry, $2.5 million in railroad stock, was already pledged to repair Blenheim's leaking roof. Builders began within weeks. Minnie Stevens crossed in 1878, trunk stacked high enough for a second carriage. Frances Work followed in 1880, her cedar boards stamped in gilt, bound for Kent. These trunks weren't luggage, they were the dowry made physical: opera cloaks, pearls, perfumed letters, gowns folded in tissue, fortunes clasped in leather and brass. Not all were opened. A Wiltshire estate ledger from 1896 recorded, one trunk received, gilt letters CV, East Wing Storage. Weeks later, the entry was struck in red. No inventory followed. Behind every photograph of pearls and satin lay a page of black ink, and sometimes a red line. Daughters crossed with their fortunes packed, and many vanished into titles. Their voices survived only in fragments: a diary page, a letter, a single crossed out line. By summer 1874, steamers in New York Harbor became floating marketplaces. The Umbria, majestic city of Paris, they carried more than cotton. They carried daughters. The docks stung with salt and coal smoke. Dock hands cursed in Irish and German as cedar-lined trunks clattered into the hold. Brass locks gleamed under soot. Gilt initials shimmered through the fog. Jennie Jerome sailed that spring, 19, sharp-eyed. By April, she stood in the British Embassy beside Lord Randolph Churchill. The match was swift. Her fortune shored up his name. His title gave hers permanence. Her trunks bore Worth gowns, embroidered slippers, lavender sachets folded in silk. By November, she gave birth in Blenheim Palace. His name was Winston. Trunks told their own stories. In 1878, Minnie Stevens filled an entire carriage with her cases. By autumn, she was Lady Paget. Her dowry revived a faded estate. In 1880, Frances Work crossed with gilt-stamped trunks. At St. Mary's Church in Kent, she married into the title of Baroness Fermoy. The marriage didn't last, but her line carried forward to Diana, Princess of Wales. Some trunks opened with ceremony, others never did. In 1896, a Wiltshire clerk wrote, "One trunk received, gilt letters, CV East Wing Storage." Weeks later, the entry was struck in red. No record followed. The voyage itself was theatre. In the Umbria's saloon, stewards poured Madeira as chandeliers swayed. Mirrors shimmered. Voices floated over tobacco haze. On deck, heiresses clutched fur collars. Gloves dampened in the salt wind. Engines thrummed beneath their feet. Letters were written mid-sea, ink blurred by sway. One, dated June 1895, aboard the Majestic, reads, "The sea is cold. My gowns will not dry. The trunk, marked in gilt, is to be delivered directly to Blenheim. It feels less mine than theirs unsigned. The violet scent lingers faintly." That same month, Consuelo Vanderbilt crossed aboard the Majestic. She would marry the Duke of Marlborough in November. In her memoir, she called the Atlantic a barrier, not a passage. Her trunks arrived before she did. Repairs began immediately. Travelers remembered fragments, the moan of a foghorn, trunks shifting in the hold, the scent of violet water at wrists, engines vibrating through candlesticks. A passenger aboard the Umbria in 1888 wrote, "The young American ladies are as numerous as the trunks, each with a governess, each destined, it seems, for a title. The gentlemen call it the Dollar Run. After 6 days, fog thickened near the Solent. The ship slowed into Southampton water, planks wet with rain. Customs took notes. Trunks logged, trunks ignored. Carriages waited to carry families to Mayfair, where guest lists were already inked. Black for those invited, red through those erased. The Atlantic was a ledger. They boarded in New York as Americans. They disembarked as futures already accounted for, their fortunes mapped to leaking roofs, drafty ballrooms, crumbling names. And with them came silence. Trunks noted, then crossed out. Guest lists blotted. Boxes marked, to be returned, unopened. The ocean carried wealth, bodies, perfumes, and mystery. Before ships departed and contracts were signed, there were fittings. Paris was pilgrimage, the Rue de la Paix, and within it, the Salon of Charles Worth. In 1873, Clara Jerome arrived with her daughters. Salt still clung to their coats from the Channel. Trunks hauled into the Hotel Meurice. The next morning, they entered Worth's salon. Gas hissed. Mirrors stretched floor to ceiling. Bolts of silk shimmered like water. Jennie Jerome stepped onto the dais. Seamstresses circled, lace drawn across her shoulders. Her mother watched in silence. Worth dismissed entire fabrics with a flick, selecting ivory for one, emerald for another. His gowns weren't garments, they were declarations. When Jennie married Randolph Churchill that April, she wore Worth. Mothers were architects. Alva Vanderbilt was commander. In 1895, she stood beside Consuelo in Worth's salon, inspecting Chantilly lace, rejecting anything less than perfection. The gown was ivory satin, its train so heavy Consuelo later called it armor for a battle I had not chosen. On her wedding morning, Consuelo wept in her locked room. Her governess was barred. The gown waited below, its pearls glowing under chandeliers. While gowns were fitted, contracts were signed. In study rooms lined with walnut, dowries were tallied. Consuelo's railroad stock was pledged to Blenheim. Francis Work's inheritance bound to Lord Fermoy. Mary Leiter's fortune was handed to India. The air in those offices smelled of wax and cigar smoke. Clerks sharpened quills. Fathers signed. Daughters stood silent in dresses sewn for lives not yet lived. No one traveled unobserved. Governesses accounted for expenses. Chaperones lingered like shadows. Aunts examined lace with pursed lips. Footmen guarded trunks. In Mayfair, they stayed at Brown's Hotel. Halls waxed to a mirror. Flowers pressed into Bibles. Dance steps practiced in candlelight. One guest in 1888 wrote, "The ladies are guarded more closely than treasure, each one carried like a jewel to be set in the right crown." Charles Worth commanded his salon like a general. He chose the fabric, the silhouette, the shade. "The gown wears the woman," he liked to say. When Sargent painted Consuelo in 1899, the lines of the gown still bore his signature, rigid, restrained, flawless. The fittings carried their own music, the whisper of silk, chalk on cloth, the faint sweetness of lavender. Pins glinted, gas hissed. Paris rattled beyond shuttered windows. The daughters stood still, mirrors reflecting them from every side. They stared at the woman they were becoming, or the woman being constructed. Even in salons built for beauty, shadows gathered. Trunks logged, initials recorded, then struck in red. Guest lists blotted. Boxes returned across the sea, never opened. Between the rustle of satin and scratch of pens, there was always silence, and in every silence a ledger waited. November the 6th, 1895. Fifth Avenue lay under a grey sky. Inside the Vanderbilt mansion, servants moved with lilies and hot water. Wax polish clung to the marble railings. Upstairs, Consuelo Vanderbilt wept behind a locked door. Her governess was barred. Alva had ordered it. The gown, ivory satin, hand-stitched lace, pearls, waited downstairs. Not celebration, obligation. Outside St. Thomas Church, flash powder burst. Inside, lilies perfumed the air. The organ thundered. 4 page boys lifted her train. Vanderbilt diamonds sparkled. The crowd saw elegance. But Consuelo later wrote, "I walked down the aisle as one walks to execution." At the altar stood Charles Spencer Churchill, Duke of Marlborough. His title gleamed, but his finances crumbled. Her $2.5 million dowry was already pledged to save Blenheim Palace. Days later, she sailed for England. Her trunks, cedar, brass, monogrammed CV, were sent ahead. Inside, Worth gowns, gloves, jewelry cases. She carried resignation. The voyage was cold. Salt stung her cheeks. Wind pressed against her veil. A barrier, not a passage, she called it. At Southampton, customs passed her trunks without inspection. She rode north to Oxfordshire, through fog and hedgerows. Blenheim rose like a fortress, stone streaked with damp. Windows rattled, fires unlit. The palace had waited for her money. Inside, the air was damp and still. She stepped beneath faded frescoes. Her trunks followed. Repairs began at once. Ledgers noted, December 12th, East Wing. January 9th, staff hired. February 17th, carpets ordered. But another line appeared and vanished. Trunk received. Gilt letters, CV. Later crossed out in red. No contents listed. The house had been saved, She had not. The Duke offered duty, not affection. Consuelo moved through galleries and libraries like a shadow, greeted, admired, but never heard. Her letters, folded in ribbon, whispered loneliness. Fires hissed in high ceilings. The silence echoed louder than organ music ever had. By winter 1896, Blenheim's repairs were underway. Ledgers noted each task: patched roofs, new carpets, fresh staff. But they didn't record the silence. Consuelo Vanderbilt had entered the palace at 19. The Duke was 24, reserved, distant, proud of her presence, indifferent to her voice. Her world became rooms, state apartments lined with portraits, smoke, and dust. The long library remained cold, even with fires lit. In her dressing room, mirrors fractured her reflection. Letters smudged in damp ink at a walnut desk. She locked her door at night. "I am surrounded by stone," she once wrote, "but it feels more fragile than my own heart." The letter was never mailed. Her initials were pressed in gold on the stationery. Violet lingered in the paper. In December she wrote, "I am a ghost in my own life." The halls echoed. Her words vanished. The Duke never read her letters. They were tied with ribbon and locked away, like her. Her marriage had started behind a locked door. On her wedding morning, her mother turned the key. Blenheim, too, became a prison. No key this time, just silence. Servants stood like statues. Footsteps muted. Portraits stared. Corridors led nowhere. Guests whispered, "The Duchess is pale." The Duke regards her as one does a clock, necessary but voiceless. The estate books remained precise, but nothing of her. No letters, no mentions. Only the trunk, noted, then crossed out in red. In her memoir, Consuelo remembered fragments, footsteps in stone halls, cold glass, tapestries damp with time. "I was gilded," she wrote, "but I was not free. Visitors praised the palace, but she was missing from its records, present only in the silence. The marriage stood, the house stood, but the woman faded, and still, in the ledger, a trunk, a name, a red line. Spring 1874. New York still echoed with Leonard Jerome's soirees, the king of Wall Street, whose fortune built theaters, stables, and a dynasty. His daughter, Jennie, had his fire. Dark eyes, sharp wit, a voice that turned rooms. At 19, she crossed to Europe, her voyage blurred with fog, perfume, and smoke. Trunks stenciled with gilt initials, gowns folded in lavender paper. By April, she stood in the gilded drawing room of the British Embassy in Paris. 3 days after meeting Lord Randolph Churchill, she married him. The embassy walls were hung with silk. Chandeliers spilled light across mirrored panels. The scent of lilies mingled with cigar smoke. Jennie's gown, pale gold embroidery from Worth, shimmered, Guests craned to see the American beauty who had captured a lord. Outside, carriages clattered. Inside, she signed her name. Jennie became Lady Randolph Churchill. Her American name remained in ink, but her identity had been exchanged for title. By November, she gave birth in the staterooms of Blenheim Palace. Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill. His first breath echoed through cold stone, a child born of gilded ambition and leaking roofs. Jennie lit London's salons like a storm, admired, gossiped, envied. Her gowns glittered, her piano crackled with fire, her scent lingered in corridors. She was legend, but also scandal. Her affairs whispered about, her politics bold, her piano playing furious. Yet beneath the glamour, she was strategist and mother. She guided Randolph, she later fueled Winston. She moved through power, not just gossip. But the ledgers at Blenheim are silent on charm. They note coal, linen, wages. Trunks arrived, initials in gilt, stacked in storerooms. Some logged, some struck in red. Jennie's presence doesn't appear in accounts. Only her impact remains, seen in portraits, felt in her son's fire. One image by Sargent shows her cloaked in velvet, eyes sharp, mouth half-curved. A woman who left silence no room to settle. She died in 1921, scandalous, admired, broke and brilliant. Her legacy wasn't written in ledgers, it was spoken in Parliament by Winston, who carried her defiance into history. Somewhere in Blenheim's storerooms, trunks may still bear her initials, erased, unopened, forgotten. Their contents, like her laughter, silenced in red. But history remembers what the ledgers don't. Jennie Jerome, mother of a prime minister, first flame of an empire's second wind. In the summer of 1880, New York murmured with the news. Frances Ellen Work, granddaughter of self-made millionaire Franklin Work, was to marry into the English aristocracy. She was 23, tall and poised, the embodiment of American refinement. Yet the match stirred unease from the start. Franklin Work, outspoken and proud of his roots in industry, disdained titles. I'd rather see my daughter dead than married to a lord, he told the press, with a certainty that echoed across drawing rooms. But fortune has its own gravity. On June 22nd, in the damp English countryside of Kent, Frances walked down the aisle of St. Mary's in ivory silk, the scent of orange blossoms drifting through the pews. Her trunks had arrived before her, cedar and leather, monogrammed in gilt, packed with Worth gowns, pearls, opera cloaks, and fortunes folded into muslin. The marriage began with splendor, dinners in London, portraits commissioned, gossip columns filled. She was painted, admired, praised. But beneath the satin and ceremony, cracks appeared. James Roche drank, spent heavily, and squandered trust. Arguments whispered behind doors spilled across staircases and into servants' halls. Frances, once radiant in the press, retreated into silence. Her letters home darkened in tone, faint with sorrow. By 1887, she had returned to New York, separated from her husband. The divorce, scandalous by Victorian standards, followed soon after. She raised her children herself, her fortune intact, her reputation bruised but unbroken. Franklin work, though cold in forgiveness, supported her quietly. She never remarried. Her words, sharp as her father's, carried through one newspaper interview. I would rather see my children free than titled. She meant it, and yet the irony ran deep. Through her son Maurice Roche, Baron Fermoy, and her granddaughter Frances, her bloodline would reach Kensington Palace. In 1981, her great-granddaughter Diana would become Princess of Wales. From a wedding in Kent to a crown in London, the arc bent further than Frances ever imagined. Records of her marriage survive only in fragments. A parish register, shipping manifests, a faded estate ledger where her initials, once noted in black, were later struck in red. Her voice is harder to find. Letters survive only in partial bundles, faint ink, water damage, the paper soft with age. In one from 1886 she wrote, I am rich, but I am not free. My wealth has been consumed by silence. The page smells faintly of mildew. History described her as tragic, another dollar princess caught in the gilded machinery of marriage for title. But there was defiance in her silence, and legacy in her refusal to be erased. She became matriarch of a royal line she never sought, a footnote turned foundation. To close her chapter is to draw a line from orange blossoms in Kent to a sapphire ring on Diana's hand. Between them lies a fortune that could not protect against loneliness, but could shape bloodlines. Her silence became inheritance. Her regret became destiny. In 1895, Mary Victoria Leiter of Chicago married George Nathaniel Curzon at St. John's Church in Mayfair. She was 24, graceful and composed, the daughter of Levi Leiter, co-founder of Field and Leiter, the store that would become Marshall Field's. The pews overflowed with orchids and ambition. Polished wood held the weight of two worlds joining, American fortune, British future. Curzon, brilliant and politically bound for greatness, brought rank and ambition. Mary brought everything else, charm, discipline, and a dowry that swept away his debts before the ink dried on the wedding register. Within 4 years, she followed him to India. In January 1903, beneath chandeliers and ceiling fans in Delhi, Mary stepped into legend. The Durbar was the ceremonial peak of empire, an imperial celebration for Edward VII's coronation. That night, she wore what would become one of history's most extravagant creations, the Peacock dress. Commissioned from the House of Worth, the gown shimmered with gold-threaded silk, each feathered eye embroidered with iridescent beetle wings imported from Bengal. Every movement made it seem to breathe, not rustle like fabric, but glide like the plumage of a living bird. Witnesses remembered the silence in the room when she entered. Maharajas draped in rubies, British officers in polished metals, Indian nobles wrapped in silk, all turned at once. The American-born Vicereine became the image of empire, radiant and untouchable, a cathedral in motion. But India was no stage. The sun was unrelenting, the climate cruel. Mary endured receptions, ceremonies, endless audiences. Her letters from Calcutta speak of the pressure behind the glamour, monsoon rains pounding shutters, the smell of wet jasmine and wood rot. She described nights where the air did not move and duties that did not end. Even her admirers noted her stillness. Lady Curzon has the serenity of a queen, one correspondent wrote. But serenity can also mean suppression. Despite the spectacle, her health began to unravel. The peacock dress dazzled in Delhi, but soon after, Mary was fading. Illness settled quietly, first fatigue, then deeper exhaustion. The demands of empire drained her, and no amount of silk or jewels could hold her together. She died in 1906, not yet 37. Her husband, crushed, never remarried. Her daughters grew up beneath portraits of a mother, remembered more for elegance than for presence. The dress survives, boxed in climate-controlled silence, its beetle wings still glowing green in low light. Museums display it under glass, its jewels intact, its wearer long gone. Ledgers from the Viceroy's household detail the expense, shipments, fittings, embroidery, Worth's charges. But nowhere do they record her weakness. No entry logs the moment her heart gave out. Her name is often reduced to a single line, Lady Curzon, deceased, 1906. But behind that red slash is the image of a woman who once shimmered brighter than anyone and was undone by the very weight of what she represented. Mary Leiter stepped into empire like a queen, but empire made no room for fragility. Her gown became immortal, her voice almost entirely lost. In June 1895, London whispered about a marriage forged not just in bloodlines, but in balance sheets. Almina Victoria Wombwell, petite, sharp, and illegitimate daughter of Alfred de Rothschild, wed George Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, heir to Highclere Castle. St. Margaret's, Westminster, overflowed with lilies and silk. Almina's dowry, over £500,000, arrived with her. It was a fortune vast enough to buy legitimacy and to restore a crumbling estate. Her trunks came from Worth's salon in Paris, filled with silk gowns, Rothschild jewels, and silver-topped perfume flasks. At Highclere, her inheritance reopened shuttered rooms, restocked cellars, and restored grandeur. Gilt returned to mirrors, footmen to their posts, chandeliers to their blaze. But it was war that transformed her legend. In 1914, Almina converted the castle into a hospital. Officers were carried into rooms once reserved for dancers. Salons smelled of antiseptic and tobacco smoke. Nurses moved quietly over Persian carpets. Almina paid for it all: bandages, linens, morphine, and walked the corridors herself. Her husband, meanwhile, turned toward Egypt. In 1907, George Herbert began funding digs in the Valley of the Kings. In 1914, he hired Howard Carter. 8 years passed. Then, in November 1922, Carter uncovered a staircase in the sand. Gold glinted behind a sealed door. Tutankhamun's tomb had been found, and Almina's dowry had made it possible. Months later, Carnarvon died in Cairo from blood poisoning after a mosquito bite. The press called it the curse of the pharaohs. Highclere fell quiet. Scandal followed. Almina faced lawsuits. The fortune dwindled. She remarried, borrowed, lived large. By her final years, she was bankrupt. Her name barely mentioned in the ledgers she once filled. Estate records still show her generosity: wages for nurses, surgical equipment, wine restocked. But they do not record her loneliness, nor the debts that came after. Without Almina, Carter's spade might never have struck stone. Without her money, Highclere may have collapsed before it could be reborn as Downton Abbey. And yet, she faded. Her gowns were sold, her trunks scattered, her name reduced to a footnote between discovery and ruin. She entered history through a wedding, passed into legend through a tomb, and left behind only fragments. Receipts, lawsuits, sealed rooms, and a silence deep as stone. Nancy Langhorne was born in 1879 in Danville, Virginia, sharp-tongued, unshakable, and raised in the shadow of tobacco wealth. By 27, divorced and undeterred, she sailed to England for a second chance. In 1906, she married Waldorf Astor, son of William Waldorf Astor, whose American millions had purchased Cliveden, a grand estate above the Thames, its marble halls quiet but waiting. Nancy arrived with trunks packed in New York, silk gowns, fox furs, pearls, and velvet. But she brought more than fabric. She brought heat. Cliveden became a magnet. Prime ministers, artists, authors passed through its rose gardens and ballrooms. Nancy's wit lit rooms brighter than chandeliers. She could charm or cut with equal ease. In 1919, Waldorf inherited a peerage and vacated his seat in Parliament. Nancy, unbothered, stepped into the political vacuum. That December, she became the first woman to sit in the British House of Commons. The chamber smelled of oak and ink. Her American voice echoed through the green benches. She was bold, often brutal. She argued for housing reform, women's rights, and famously dueled with Churchill. "If I were your wife, I'd poison your tea," she once told him. "If I were your husband, I'd drink it," he replied. She served for over 2 decades, never softening. Loved by some, loathed by others, she was unforgettable. But Nancy wasn't without contradiction. Her speeches could inspire, but her prejudices could alienate. Her legacy was split between firsts and flaws. Still, Cliveden remained her empire. Dinners resumed, guest lists lengthened. The estate hummed with influence. The ledgers list shipments of wine, cut roses, handwritten menus, and Nancy's fingerprints on every page. She didn't vanish into title. She wielded it. The sound of empire once came from a machine. In the 1850s, Isaac Singer's invention stitched its way through parlors and factories. With every turn of the wheel, his fortune grew, vast, loud, scandal-lined. When he died in 1875, the empire splintered among many heirs, each with money, few with purpose. Winnaretta, born in Yonkers in 1865, chose something different. By the 1880s, she had left New York behind. Paris pulled at her, its salons, its language, its unspoken rules. Marriage was expected. She complied, briefly. Her union to Prince Louis d'Esquet-Montbéliard was unconsummated, annulled in 5 years. In 1893, she wed again, Prince Edmond de Polignac, over 30 years her senior, a composer, kind, gentle, uninterested in heirs. It was a marriage of understanding, not obligation. They built a sanctuary on Avenue Henri Martin. Inside, gold-framed mirrors, candle-lit pianos, and the scent of polished wood and tobacco. Outside, the streets rang with carriage wheels. Within their salon, modernism was being born. Debussy played new pieces here. Ravel tested melodies that shimmered like light. Satie wandered in, strange and brilliant. Later, Stravinsky arrived, his ideas sharp as glass. Painters, poets, and dancers moved in and out, voices layered in French and English, conversation folding between art and rebellion. Winnaretta dressed simply, spoke directly, funded everything. Her ledgers didn't list servants, they listed composers. Where other trunks carried tiaras, hers held manuscripts. She was a duchess, but never still. After Edmund's death in 1901, she deepened her work. Her salon remained open even through the Nazi occupation. When others fled, she stayed. She chose to be remembered in sound. Her influence lives in orchestras, scores, and notes, long after the scent of her salon faded. Her name may be a footnote in history books, but in concert halls, she is part of every overture. Winnaretta didn't cross the ocean for a title. She crossed it to transform her inheritance into legacy, and unlike most, she wrote her own. Contracts could secure marriages. Ledgers could bind fortunes. But public memory needed a face. Portraits in oil, photographs in silver, headlines inked in serif. The heiresses didn't just live history, they were displayed inside it. John Singer Sargent knew what legacy demanded. By the 1890s, he had become the painter of the elite. His brush turned silk into memory, light into permanence. He didn't paint likenesses, he painted myth. In 1899, he painted Consuelo Vanderbilt, severe ivory silk, pearls drawn tight, her posture marble straight. The canvas glowed, yet behind her gaze, resignation. Sargent had painted silence just as carefully as satin. He painted Jennie Jerome too, in velvet so deep it nearly consumed the frame. Her eyes sparked with wit, her mouth poised for something cutting. If ledgers forgot her, Sargent did not. Even Mary Curzon, before India, was given his brush. Her eyes already shadowed, her frame regal but faintly strained. The portrait captured her poise, but also her fragility. These sittings were ritual. The smell of oil and turpentine, the stillness, the endless adjustment of hands, of lace, of pearls. Paint that told stories no memoir ever could. Outside the salons, another medium rose, the camera. By the 1880s, photography was everywhere. Studios in London and New York turned heiresses into social currency. Cartes de visite, cabinet prints, posed elegance fixed on stiff card. Sitters stood still under painted backdrops, marble columns, garden arches, while light etched their presence onto glass. In New York parlors, families flipped albums filled with heiresses already married off, their names scripted on the back, their smiles subtle, their gowns arranged not for comfort, but for reputation. The press followed with devotion. In 1895, the New York Times announced Consuelo's marriage with numbers before names. Railroad millions join with dukedom. It listed her dowry, the ceremony, the church, the repairs her fortune would fund at Blenheim. Frances' work was called Beauty of Fortune and Promise. Her looks mentioned only after her inheritance. Even trunks were newsworthy. A carriage filled with Miss Stevens's cases. Cedar chest marked CV. They described the ivory satin, the lilies, the page boys, the pageantry, but they never described the woman inside. Then came the satire. Pamphlets called them dollar princesses, drawn with exaggerated purses and exaggerated titles. Consuelo lampooned as the girl with the golden key. Frances' work, dragging crates of cash behind her. Jennie Jerome, drawn with tilted crown and sharpened grin. The portraits remain, in galleries, in archives. Sometimes above staircases their subjects never climbed again. The photographs yellow, the newspaper ink fades, yet their silence persists. The silence of who they really were. Sargent's brush caught it, the camera hinted at it, but the ledgers, those missed it entirely. In the end, these women were remembered not only by what they wore, but by how still they had to remain while others captured them. Houses remember, not with voice, but with absence. Blenheim, Cliveden, Highclere. Behind their carved doors were rooms no guest entered, trunks no servant unpacked, names no one spoke aloud. The evidence survived in scraps, a crossed-out ledger, a smudged guest list, a trunk logged, then erased. In 1896, a clerk at Blenheim wrote, "One trunk received, gilt letters, CV East Wing Storage." No inventory followed. The entry was later struck in red. At Cliveden, 1910. Box to be returned to New York, unopened. No initials, no contents, no explanation. These were not clerical errors, they were choices. Silences written in ink. At Blenheim, a guest list for a Marlborough ball shows 3 names, blurred, erased with a deliberate hand. No marginal note, only the heavy stroke of removal. Highclere carried its own ghosts. After Lord Carnarvon's death in Cairo in 1923, one room was sealed. Servants said it held his papers, perhaps more, artifacts, regrets. No one was allowed inside. In these great houses, certain doors were never unlocked, curtains drawn, portraits removed, rooms unmarked on guest maps. The emptiness became part of the architecture. Why were trunks left unopened? Some say they held returned gifts, unworn gowns, letters too damning to preserve. Others speak of heirlooms tied to scandal, objects too burdened by memory to remain on display. In a visitor's diary from 1901, there is a chamber to which we are not admitted. They say it holds the Duchess's American things, trunks unopened, gathering dust. During wartime, nurses at Highclere were told not to enter the upper east wing. Even as beds were needed, certain rooms remained locked. Silence protected them more than walls. At Cliveden, a portrait was removed, but the clean square remained on faded wallpaper, brighter than its surroundings. The void more visible than the presence had ever been. Sealing a room, crossing a name, returning a trunk. These were acts of control, not omissions, but intentions. Ledgers are filled with the mundane, coal deliveries, footmen's wages, floral arrangements. But between them are gaps, gaps that echo. A trunk noted, then struck. A box returned, unopened. A name smeared across a guest list. These aren't anomalies. They're the story. Because what's missing often tells us more than what remains. A ball was never just music. It was a declaration of power, of inclusion. To be invited was to exist. To be struck from the list was to vanish before the first note. The invitations were artifacts themselves. Heavy card, engraved script, a crest pressed in wax. To hold one was to step into history. To be left out, or worse, removed, was to disappear in silence. At Blenheim, in 1898, one guest list survives. 50 names, handwritten in ink. 3 are crossed out, the ink darker, more deliberate. No explanation given, just absence, visible. At Cliveden, 1922, Nancy Astor's dinner list includes a name slashed in red. A quick note in the margin, not suitable. The name gone. The judgment remains. During the war years, Highclere hosted dinners to honor wounded officers. Guest lists were prepared, altered, names penciled, then erased. These were quiet edits, reputations protected, boundaries drawn. To strike a name was to exercise control. Ink as exclusion. Power rendered in a single line. The trunks told the same story. Minnie Stevens' trunks once filled a carriage in 1878, opened with ceremony, dresses unfurled, Worth gowns breathed back to life under candlelight. Francis' works arrived in Kent 2 years later. Gilt initials gleamed, some items listed, some not. A few trunks inventoried, others forgotten. And then the most famous, one trunk received, gilt letters CV, East Wing Storage, noted at Blenheim, 1896. Struck through days later, no contents listed. The trunk effectively disappeared. Clevedon, 1910. Box to be returned to New York, unopened. Crossed an ocean only to return untouched. The letters followed the same pattern. Archives hold ribbon, but not pages. Letters referenced, but missing. Mentions of replies that no longer exist. In Consuelo's case, entire sections of her correspondence fall silent. A November 1895 letter, cited in another's diary, never found. In the Astor papers, one torn fragment survives. I cannot bear the thought of tomorrow's ball. The rest is missing. The ink cuts off. The page ends in silence. To cross out a name, to return a trunk, to burn a letter. Each was a curated erasure, not oversight, intent. Imagine the ball itself, chandeliers blazing, gowns sweeping polished floors, the scent of lilies and champagne in the air, but also the shadow of someone not there, a name erased, a trunk sealed, a letter never sent. The ledgers track it all, names entered, names removed, objects shipped, trunks returned, invitations extended, then revoked. These women brought fortunes, but they could be struck from memory with the same pen that had written them in. And when that happened, it wasn't noise that followed, it was silence. The orchestra went silent, the lilies wilted, candles burned down to wax stubs. What followed the wedding ball wasn't always a life. Often, it was an unraveling. Consuelo Vanderbilt fulfilled her role for decades. She bore 2 sons, stood beside the Duke of Marlborough, and presided over Blenheim with expected grace. But the palace remained cold. Her letters spoke not of love, but of obligation. By 1906, she was slipping away into charity work, hospitals, and quiet defiance. In 1920, she divorced. Scandal followed, but so did freedom. 2 years later, she married Jacques Balsan, a French aviator. Not a title, not a politician. At last, she wrote, I was no longer an entry in an account book. I was simply myself. Frances' works, unraveling, came sooner. Her marriage collapsed within 7 years. In 1887, she returned to New York with her children and fortune intact. Her father, who had warned her from the start, offered no warmth. She raised her children alone, refused to remarry, and told the press, "I would rather see my children free than titled." Yet her line, through her son, would one day lead to Diana, Princess of Wales. Mary Curzon never lived long enough for a second life. After dazzling India in the Peacock dress in 1903, she weakened quickly. By 1906, she was gone. Her dresses remained. Her image in portraits endured, but her voice was stilled before middle age. Almina Carnarvon's story turned after glory. Her Rothschild fortune rebuilt Highclere and funded the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. But when Lord Carnarvon died in Cairo in 1923, myth overtook memory. The Pharaoh's curse made headlines. Her fortune unraveled in lawsuits and debt. She remarried, but never recovered her status. Ledgers that once documented her generosity began to track losses, loans unpaid, jewels sold, creditors unpaid. Nancy Astor carved a different second act. Her marriage endured. In 1919, she entered Parliament, the first woman to sit in the House of Commons. Her voice rang sharp, her presence impossible to ignore. But politics carries its own contradictions. She was admired, but controversial. She broke barriers, but held biases. Her final years were quiet. Cliveden remained, but the spotlight faded. Winnaretta Singer, unlike the others, had never surrendered herself to title. Her marriages were arrangements. Her Paris salon thrived long after her husband's death. She became a patron, a force, a quiet queen of music. Her second life had always been her first. Each of these women left the ballroom differently. Some fled, some stayed, some were forgotten. Yet in all cases, the ledgers continued. Coal delivered, wages paid, wine ordered, and beneath those tidy lines, something unrecorded. A name that once lit a ballroom, now crossed out. History remembers their second lives in fragments. Consuelo, her voice finally her own. Frances, unyielding, sharp as ever. Mary, a shimmer remembered, a body gone. Almina, generous, undone. Nancy, contradictory, immortal. Winnaretta, quiet, unfading. They rebuilt castles, then tried to rebuild themselves. Some succeeded. Behind every satin train and diamond tiara was a transaction. By the 1870s, England's land-rich aristocracy was crumbling. Their wealth, once tied to fields, rents, and grain, couldn't compete with American wheat, industrialization, or falling prices. The agricultural depression drained estates. Roofs leaked, staff vanished, drawing rooms darkened. Titles still held power, but titles couldn't patch stone. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, fortunes were rising. Steel, railroads, copper, oil. Families like the Vanderbilts, Lehmans, and Singers amassed fortunes in decades, not generations. But what they lacked was lineage. Marriage became the bridge. An American dowry could save a dukedom. A title could grant a family legacy. Each party gained what the other lacked, until both lost something deeper. Consuelo Vanderbilt's millions repaired Blenheim's East Wing. Francis Work's inheritance steadied the Fermoy estates. Mary Leiter's dowry enabled George Curzon's rise in British India. Almina's Rothschild wealth brought Highclere back to life. Ledgers documented all. Restorations ordered within weeks of each wedding. These weren't romantic unions. They were ledgers made flesh. One letter from a father reads, "The estate requires 10,000 per annum. She shall provide it. In return, her children shall inherit a name." Blenheim's scaffolding went up as soon as Consuelo arrived. Almina's fortune restocked cellars, rehung tapestries, hired maids. Nancy Astor's dollars lit Cliveden with electricity and filled it with ministers. The numbers were cold but exact. 2.5 million from Consuelo, 15 million from Francis, £500,000 from Almina. None of it earned a line of love in the ledgers. These women bought survival, but not peace. Titles preserved the house, not the marriage. One by one, the fortunes faded. Dowries spent. Marriages ended. Estates slipped again. After war came, many homes sold off art, land, or wings. Titles endured on paper, but paper doesn't keep out the rain. The press romanticized the arrangements, but the ledgers tell the truth. The marriages weren't alliances, they were lifelines, and lifelines fray. In the end, the titles survived, but the women, their choices, their costs, are what echo loudest in the silence of the record. The dowries were meant to save houses, but they built futures too. The children of these marriages were born into two worlds, American wealth and English legacy. What they inherited wasn't just stone, it was contradiction. Jennie Jerome's son, Winston Churchill, was born in Blenheim staterooms in November 1874. His first cries echoed beneath cracked ceilings. He would later stand before Parliament, defiant and unshakable, a voice shaped by empire, but fueled by an American mother who had once crossed the ocean with lavender-scented gloves and a Worth gown. Francis Work's children inherited nobility and fracture. Her son, Maurice Roche, became the fourth Baron Fermoy. Through him came Frances Roche, and from her, Diana. In 1981, the girl whose great-grandmother rejected titles became Princess of Wales. Consuelo Vanderbilt bore two sons at Blenheim. John became the 10th Duke of Marlborough. Ivor pursued quieter ambitions. Their lives were measured by portraits, inheritances, and rooms their mother had paid to restore, but never truly belonged to. Mary Curzon died before her daughters grew. Her absence became part of their story, her image preserved in Sargent's brushstrokes, Her fragility whispered through corridors in Mayfair. Almina Carnarvon's son, Henry, inherited Highclere. He grew up surrounded by echoes of war wards and whispers of Egypt. His father's obsession with Tutankhamun became legend. His mother's fortune and its disappearance lingered unspoken in estate accounts. Nancy Astor's children walked Cliveden's corridors as politics swirled outside. Her son inherited the title, her legacy, louder. She taught them not just how to speak, but how to command a room. Winnaretta Singer left no children of blood, but her legacy was heard in music halls across Europe. She mothered symphonies, composers, commissions. She raised a generation of sound, not heirs. In the nurseries of these homes, the walls whispered of inheritance. Carved cradles stood beneath portraits of ancestors who had drained fortunes their mothers had rebuilt. Expectations arrived before speech. Estate ledgers recorded what they could. Baptisms, tutors, toys, but not the pressure. Some children thrived, some broke. Some, like Winston and Diana, shaped history. Others were forgotten, folded into lineages and titles, their mother's fortunes a fading footnote. They were heirs, but also echoes. The illusion glittered until it didn't. By the early 1900s, the world the heiresses married into had begun to fracture. The castles still glowed, balls still echoed, but beneath chandeliers, cracks spread. The Edwardian era clung to spectacle, parades, processions, house parties. But debts climbed, inheritance shrank. Satirists mocked the dollar princesses in ink, dragging castles behind velvet trains. Then, in 1914, war came. Young men from all ranks marched, aristocrats, merchants, clerks. Titles did not shield them from bullets. At Highclere, Almina Carnarvon transformed the estate into a hospital. Chandeliers dimmed, beds lined the galleries, salons smelled of antiseptic and smoke. Almina walked the corridors herself. At Blenheim, wounded soldiers replaced banquet guests. Fires burned in rooms once shuttered. Consuelo, long separated from the Duke, now directed her wealth to relief. Cliveden opened its gardens to recovering Canadians. Nancy Astor served tea beneath ceilings once reserved for politics and flirtation. The castles shifted from grandeur to function, but the strain ran deeper. After the war, marriages faltered, scandals surfaced. The press turned sharp. Consuelo divorced in 1920. Francis Work's earlier divorce was dredged back up. Almina faced lawsuits. Nancy's political career drew fire, admired for her voice, criticized for its edges. Tutankhamun's tomb was discovered in 1922, but the curse took the headlines when Carnarvon died suddenly. Highclere fell back into myth. Fortunes thinned. America's wealth turned to oil, automobiles, cinema. Across England, estates sold art, land, whole wings. Newspapers once breathless about jewels now questioned extravagance. Taxes rose, public favor shifted. The women, once saviors, became shadows. Consuelo found peace in Paris. Frances stood tall but faded. Mary Curzon was already gone. Almina sank into debt. Nancy divided opinion. Winnaretta stayed in her Paris salon, quiet and unwavering. The ledgers never stopped. Coal, wages, wine. But between those lines, silence grew. The castles survived. The lives inside them changed. Time dulled the chandeliers. Music vanished from ballrooms. Names once printed in bold softened to barely a footnote. Some heiresses endured. Others slipped into silence. Most were forgotten. Consuelo Vanderbilt outlived the palace she restored. After her divorce, she remarried and settled in Paris, far from Blenheim stone. Her memoir, The Glitter and the Gold, published in 1953, gave her voice back. I was no longer an entry in a ledger, she wrote. I was myself. She died in 1964. The papers remembered her wealth. Few mentioned her sorrow. Frances Ellen Work, who swore she'd rather see her children free than titled, returned to New York after divorce. Her fortune survived. Her trust in aristocracy did not. She died in 1947, unaware her great-granddaughter would become Princess of Wales. Mary Curzon never reached middle age. She died in 1906. The peacock dress lived on. Her image survived in paintings. Her voice, barely at all. Almina Carnarvon lived until 1969, bankrupt and almost unknown. The woman who had once rebuilt Highclere and funded Tutankhamun's tomb was mentioned in court records more than memoirs. Nancy Astor remained visible longest. The first woman to take a seat in Parliament, she served until 1945. She died in 1964, remembered as pioneer in contradiction. Winnaretta singer died in 1943 in occupied Paris. Her salon had outlasted politics, war, and prejudice. Her name faded from public memory, but her patronage endured, in orchestras, in scores, in sound. But most, over 350 women, vanished from the record. Their trunks unpacked, their names changed, their fortunes absorbed. No memoirs, no portraits, no gowns in museums, just faint initials in shipping logs or the occasional red slash in a ledger. Some died young, others lived long but quietly. Their letters were burned, their jewels sold, their stories lost. The survivors, the houses, Blenheim, Highclere, Cliveden, their walls still stand, patched by fortunes no longer remembered. A few names remain: Consuelo, Nancy, Diana, but most are gone. And it's in that erasure, in the quiet crossing out, that their truth lingers. It always begins with a trunk, cedar, brass, initials in gilt, heavy enough for 2 men, logged in the east wing. Then, crossed out in red, not opened, not inventoried, just noted, struck, and left behind. Sometimes, decades later, it's found, half filled or empty. A glove, a letter, a perfume bottle gone faint, or it's never found at all. The only proof, a single line in a ledger, now faded. For Consuelo Vanderbilt, the trunk became the symbol of a life never chosen. The years locked inside stone halls she paid to restore. For Frances' work, it was irony sealed in leather. For Mary Curzon, it was the peacock dress folded away forever. For Almina, it was a fortune drained into silence. For Nancy Astor, a voice louder than any house. For Winnaretta Singer, it was music in place of airs. The ledgers are quiet, black ink for arrivals, red lines for erasure, guest lists, storage records, shipping orders. Then one anomaly, a trunk, a name, a line through both. Rooms were sealed, portraits removed, doors closed permanently, trunks sent back across the sea, unopened. At Blenheim, tourists are told of Winston's birth, a passing mention of Consuelo, but never the red line. At Highclere, Almina's story is eclipsed by a pharaoh's tomb and a fictional drama. The real woman, generous, then erased, waits in court documents and faint penciled notes. At Cliveden, Nancy's name lingers, but the names she struck from her guest lists, the erased ones, are not remembered. And always, there is the trunk, unopened, returned, silenced. History remembers speeches, victories, names engraved in stone. But what history forgets, the initials crossed out, the trunks never unpacked, often tells us more. The heiresses came to England with jewels, titles, and fortunes. But what they left behind wasn't just repaired roofs or royal bloodlines. It was silence, deliberate, careful, heavy. And sometimes, that silence is the loudest thing in the archive. The trunk waits. The ledger is closed. But the story, hers, remains. And on the next page of the ledger, we leave the castles of England and step inside their drawing rooms. Rooms lined with velvet, gaslight, and wallpaper bright as spring leaves. Wallpaper that killed more than disease. Join us for the next story in history's ledger. Why Victorian wallpaper killed more than disease.